There was likely a great deal of excitement leading up to the 1802 Constitutional Convention. As the first state to be carved out of the Northwest Territory, Ohio set the precedent for future states to come.
Leading up to the Ohio Constitutional Convention, Ohioans were really intrigued to know what was going to play out because there was so much at stake. Who was going to control government? What ultimately would happen in terms of slavery's expansion into the Northwest Territory?
Ohio would be the first so-called Western state that's carved out of the Northwest Territory. And so in many ways, it laid the foundation, good and bad, for all the future Western states carved out of that territory. So many of the other states that came after Ohio looked to Ohio as the beacon of how we organize a state, on what grounds, and who should be a citizen, who should not be.
Slavery was one of many subjects that Ohioans were concerned about, not least the over 300 African Americans who lived in Ohio. But also Ohio had to consider what was going to happen as they were bordered by Virginia and Kentucky, two slave states.
At the Constitutional Convention of 1802, there clearly was a divide between those who believe in the institution of slavery and those who were adamantly opposed to it.
Fortunately, there were several delegates attending the Constitutional Convention who would stop at nothing to fight for the continued prohibition of slavery in Ohio. Two of those men from Washington County were Rufus Putnam and Ephraim Cutler. Ephraim Cutler was an early Ohio political leader and educator. His political career began in 1801 when Ohio voters elected him to the territorial legislature. As a true believer in the horrors of slavery, once elected to serve as a delegate at the Constitutional Convention, Cutler knew it was his duty to make sure Ohio continued its path as a slave-free state.
Ephraim Cutler notes in his diary that on the day that the Constitution would be passed, that the anti-slavery clause might not be included. At the time of the Constitutional Convention, when the issue of slavery was coming up for a vote, it had the appearance that Ohio could have slavery. Ephraim was at their boarding house. He hadn't been feeling well that day.
Fortunately, Cutler's friend and colleague Rufus Putnam knew how important Cutler's presence was at the convention. According to several sources, Putnam went to Cutler's room and exclaimed, "Cutler, you must get well. Be in your place, or you will lose your favorite measure." In his diary, Cutler writes, "I went to the convention and moved to strike out the obnoxious matter and made my objections as forcibly as I was able." And according to Cutler, the measure passed by a single vote. Slavery would remain illegal in Ohio.
I just personally feel that that's the most marvelous thing, that we owe a tremendous amount of debt to both of those men. Ephraim Cutler's view on slavery was so strong that it would have taken something really dramatic to keep him away from not only having his voice heard, but casting his vote against it.
Ohio becoming a free state, again, set the tone for what the other states that were carved out of the Northwest Territory knew that they had to do, the right thing to do, the moral thing and the legal thing. But to African Americans, whom I'm most concerned with, it was a beacon of freedom. It meant that the state, in their minds, was welcoming them and encouraging them to come. And they fled, especially in the regions closest to Ohio. It's just similar to the Emancipation Proclamation. No one really knows or cares that it legally didn't free that many people, just 10,000. What it meant emotionally and symbolically is why they flooded into the state, and they did. So in many ways, it was a symbol of Black freedom. Now, the state didn't want to be that symbol of Black freedom, but that's what it became.
So while Ephraim Cutler was very anti-slavery, others believe he may have misremembered history and that slavery would have comfortably been prohibited within the Constitution. Regardless, the Constitution in this room laid a foundation for the rights that Ohioans were going to have, but also the responsibilities that were necessary to make sure that those rights were guaranteed.